The night I caught my husband glued to his mistress, the entire hotel lobby became their stage of shame. Red ambulance lights ricocheted across marble walls. Guests in sequined gowns gasped, and camera flashes stung the air like lightning. Wrapped in thin white sheets, the two of them looked less like lovers and more like a grotesque art installation, an exhibit no one had asked to see. I didn't blink. I didn't move. Because long before that night, the cracks in my marriage had already begun to whisper. It started quietly, like dust settling on a forgotten canvas. Ethan would come home later and later, murmuring something about business dinners. He used to talk endlessly about deals, renovations, and future plans, but now his words shrank to single syllables, tossed out like crumbs I was supposed to follow. The silence between us stretched so wide I could hear the tick of the dining room clock like a gavel, pounding out a verdict I wasn't ready to face. One evening, I reached for his jacket draped over a chair. A faint trace of vanilla perfume clung to the collar, soft and sweet but alien in my home. I pressed the fabric to my face again, almost hoping I had imagined it. My chest tightened. Vanilla had never been my scent. Mine was always jasmine, clean, subtle, a reminder of summers in the gallery garden. This was someone else's declaration, a ghost staking a claim. "Long day," he said, dropping his briefcase by the door, avoiding my eyes. He loosened his tie with exaggerated fatigue, as if even his neck was exhausted from carrying lies. I forced a smile. "Another dinner?" "Partners from Houston." His tone was flat, rehearsed. I nodded, though inside, a whisper grew louder. Who wears vanilla for business? The next night, after hosting an exhibition at the gallery, I walked to his car to fetch the shawl I had forgotten. The parking lot was silent except for the hum of street lamps. I opened the glove compartment, expecting only registration papers or stray receipts. Instead, my hand brushed against something smooth and sleek. A black bottle, luxurious, foreign. At first, I thought it was cologne, but when I twisted the cap, a slick, musky fragrance clung to my fingers. Massage oil? Expensive? Imported. My throat went dry. My husband hadn't touched me in months. I stared at the bottle under the harsh lamplight, the liquid inside gleaming like molten deceit. My pulse thudded in my ears. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's work stress. Maybe... But the lie collapsed before it could take shape. My instincts screamed louder than my rationalizations. I slid the bottle back, careful, deliberate, as though returning a weapon to its sheath. Then I closed the glove compartment with a soft click that felt louder than thunder. My lips curved into a smile no one could see. Not because I wasn't hurting. God, I was. But because something inside me shifted. The wound hardened into something sharper. A seed was planted that night, not of despair, but of vengeance. At home, the silence greeted me like a heavy curtain. Ethan was already in bed, his soft snores filling the room. Once, that sound had comforted me. Tonight, it mocked me. I stood at the doorway, watching his chest rise and fall, imagining the same rhythm synced with someone else's body. Rage swelled, hot and bitter, but I swallowed it whole. He rolled over, face relaxed in the dim light, utterly unbothered. It was the face of a man who believed he'd never be caught. I turned away before I could scream. The kitchen clock ticked. The refrigerator hummed. My world, so carefully curated like the paintings in my gallery, had been invaded by a splash of garish paint, one I couldn't erase. The next morning, as I poured his coffee, I studied him. He stirred the cup absent-mindedly, eyes on his phone. The faintest smile ghosted across his lips at something on the screen. "What's funny?" I asked lightly. "Nothing." He slipped the phone face down on the table, sipping without meeting my gaze. The ceramic clink echoed, too loud in the small kitchen. I pressed my nails into my palm under the tablecloth. Nothing was never nothing. Later that day, while cleaning the laundry, I found a receipt tucked in his pocket. A steakhouse in San Antonio, 2 entrees, a bottle of Cabernet, the same wine he bought me on our 10th anniversary. My breath hitched. He had told me he was in Dallas. He hated Dallas. But San Antonio? He loved it there. He always said the city reminded him of his late mother. Now, it was reminding me of betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed, receipt trembling in my hand. I thought of the last time he took me to a place like that. A decade ago, when I opened the gallery. Candlelight, laughter, the way he toasted to our future. That memory collapsed in on itself like a painting eaten by mold. I snapped a photo of the receipt with my phone. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was sharpening. Evidence. That's what I needed now. Not tears, not confrontation. Evidence. When Ethan came home that night, I kissed his cheek, the faint taste of cologne and guilt lingering on my lips. He smiled absently, oblivious. He didn't notice the way my eyes lingered on him like a curator appraising a forgery. I went to the garage later, flashlight in hand. The SUV smelled faintly of gasoline and perfume. I searched under seats, through compartments. Loose change, old water bottles. Then, under the passenger mat, a napkin crumpled and soaked in vanilla fragrance. I held it up, inhaled, and nearly gagged. A vulgar perfume, sharp and invasive. It wasn't mine. It wasn't his. I took pictures, every angle, every detail, as if my phone could capture the stench of betrayal. My heart pounded, but my face stayed calm, the mask of a woman learning the art of war. Back in the kitchen, I washed my hands with lemon soap until my skin burned, as if I could scrub away the contamination. The citrus bite stung, but the smell of betrayal clung stubbornly in my mind. I stood at the window, staring into the night. The neighborhood was quiet, only the chirping of crickets breaking the stillness. And yet, inside me, a storm raged. My husband's secret life was no longer a suspicion. It was a shadow creeping across every corner of mine. But I would not let that shadow consume me. Not yet, because what I was about to do next would set in motion a chain of events that would make the entire city talk. By morning, resolve had a taste, metallic, steady, like the tang of a key held between the teeth. I brewed coffee I didn't drink, set out a cup he wouldn't notice, and opened my laptop at the kitchen island. A blank note stared back at me. Title: Inventory of Truth. I listed what I had. 1. Vanilla on his collar. 2. Black bottle in the glove compartment. 3. Steakhouse receipt. 2 entrees, Cabernet. 4. Crumpled napkin, strong scent. The list looked small. Lies rarely arrived as confessions. They leaked, like rain under a warped window. I needed more. When he left, kiss to my hair, the faintest clink of a wedding band against his mug. I slipped my phone into my pocket and walked to the gallery. The front door chimed as I entered, and the smell of oil paint and wood polish met me like an embrace from an older, wiser version of myself. Light poured in through the skylight, patient and honest. I loved that about light. It had no agenda. I called Marla, a regular at our openings, the kind of woman who kept stories the way others kept pearls. "You once mentioned a private investigator," I said, voice steady. "A discreet one." She didn't ask why. "Name is Thomas Vale. He's expensive. Worth it." A number arrived in a text seconds later, followed by, "Are you okay?" I stared at the screen. Not yet. "Thank you," I typed back. When I called, a calm voice answered on the second ring. "Thomas?" "I need proof," I said, "of a man who's very careful." "All careful men are predictable," he replied. "Tell me what you have." I gave him the inventory. He didn't gasp or sigh or sympathize. He organized. "I'll need a photo, license plate, usual routes, habits. Do not confront him. Do not change your routine. I'll ping you at 8 p.m. "Tonight?" "I prefer beginnings," he said, as if infidelity had a schedule. I sent what he asked for and spent the day moving through the gallery like an actor whose lines had been erased. I placed placards, adjusted spotlights, answered emails with polite phrases that looked intact and felt broken. Every canvas I passed, a cobalt cityscape, a woman turning away from a window, a field cracked open by drought, seemed to be painting me back. At 7:51 p.m., a message. "Parking lot of the Esplanade, level 3, corner near the elevators. Don't make eye contact. Pretend to be on a call." I hated the cloak and dagger of it. Hated that my marriage had become a hallway where I needed to walk on the edges of the rug. Still, I followed directions. The evening air held heat like a secret. I took the elevator to level 3 and pretended to argue with a client as I leaned on a concrete column. A gray sedan rolled in and parked in shadow. The driver's door opened. Thomas was not what I expected. No trench coat, no fedora. Just a neutral face that could disappear in a crowd and shoes that didn't squeak. He handed me a small envelope as if it contained a spare key. "GPS transponder," he said. "Magnetized. Legal gray, but common." "I prefer a cleaner method. Patterns. He'll hang himself with routine. I'll trail him tonight. Check your phone for a link. Live location when appropriate." "What if he doesn't do anything?" I asked. "They always do," he said, and melted back into the driver's seat. I returned home before Ethan. The kitchen clock told me he was late. The porch light made a small, bright circle on the step, as if the house was waiting, loyal and uncomprehending. When he finally entered, his movements were careful. Coat on chair, keys in bowl, phone face down. He kissed my temple and told me about a contractor with a temper. The kind of anecdote that used to include details. Tonight, it had none. He ate mechanically, spoke gently, and never once asked how my day had been. At 10:14 p.m., as he showered, my phone pulsed. A map bloomed, a dot moving along South Congress, then west, then south again. Waypoint, the Cypress House Hotel. The description arrived like a whisper. Valet entrance, late-night lobby traffic, private elevator to suites. I felt my throat close. The shower shut off. Water ticked from tile to drain. I slid my phone under a magazine just as he walked in, towel at his waist, eyes soft, mouth shaped into unearned normalcy. "You okay?" he asked. Mildly. "Fine," I said, my voice a room I had locked from the inside. He slept within minutes. I lay awake and watched the ceiling darken and brighten with passing headlights. The map dot didn't return until after midnight. It slid home and settled. He would wake in the morning with the same lines at the corners of his eyes and the same lies in the corners of his mouth. At dawn, I baked muffins I didn't taste and packed them in a bag for the gallery staff. He took one, said, "You're an angel," and left a crumb trail to the door. My phone vibrated the moment it closed. Photos. The folder opened like a wound. There he was in a crisp blue shirt, stepping out of the hotel's private elevator, head tilted toward a woman whose face was turned away. Her dress was black and precise, hair pinned up, posture intimate in the way bodies learn after secrets become habit. Another image, his hand at the small of her back, both of them angled toward the valet desk. Another, their reflection in the glass. The kind of photograph that confesses without showing much at all. Beneath the images, Thomas's note. Routine suggests this is not a first time. I'll get faces. Tonight, new vantage. Also, check charges on joint card ending 284-1. My breath thinned. The joint card. I opened the bank app with rigid fingers, scrolled past groceries and framing supplies and gas. There, Cypress House, 3 nights in 2 weeks. Cordell and Hunt Steak, Rivea Lounge, Bonnet and Cohen Floral. I remembered a bouquet I never received. White peonies that appeared on the dining table one evening with a card addressed to no name at all. He'd said a developer sent them. We'd laughed about men who used flowers like apologies. I sat down on the kitchen floor and pressed my fist to my mouth. I wasn't crying. Not exactly. Tears had a purpose, to wash, to relieve. This was different, a kind of internal weather with no rain. After a minute, I stood, wiped the spotless counter, and took a photo of the transaction list. Evidence. Every click became a small reclaiming. At lunch, I messaged Thomas. I need audio, or words I can't unknow. Working on it, he replied. I can't plant anything in his car or home, but I can plant myself within earshot. That night, the map dot traveled east, not to the hotel, but to a restaurant with mirrored ceilings and a reputation for cocktails that looked like science experiments. I parked 2 blocks away and walked. The city had that late evening swagger, heels on pavement, laughter flickering like neon. I didn't go inside. I stood across the street and watched through tall windows the way you watch an aquarium. 2 figures drifting toward each other in rehearsed currents. Thomas stood near the bar, close enough to sip his drink, and far enough to be invisible. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. My phone buzzed once. Corner booth, left. He faces the room. She faces him. I saw my husband tip his head down to better see the woman's face. I saw her laugh with her hand at her throat. I saw the exact moment he forgot he had a wife or a house or a clock that ticked like a warning. It wasn't grand passion. It was something smaller and sleeker, self-worship in a 2-person mirror. I had the strangest urge to step into traffic just so a stranger would take my elbow and say, "Careful." I stood very still and dug my nails into my palm again. The waitress delivered a bottle of Cabernet. He lifted it with theatrical nostalgia and set it down with ceremony. I smelled the memory before I named it. The anniversary wine. The room tilted. I locked my knees. Evidence. I whispered it like prayer. Evidence. He left before 9. She followed 3 minutes later, the space between them measured like a secret. They didn't touch in the doorway. Secrets prefer indoor air. Thomas texted, "Tomorrow. We escalate." "What does that mean?" I typed, hands stiff. "Patterns point to Thursdays and Sundays. Thursdays are dinner, Sundays are hotel. Tomorrow is Thursday. If he breaks pattern, it means caution. If he keeps it, it means confidence. Confidence is my favorite. The next day, I forced normalcy through the gallery like a broom. I took a call with a collector and heard myself laughing politely, as if the sound belonged to another woman who hadn't invented a folder called Inventory of Truth. At 4, I left early. I needed to see the inside of my own home as if it were new, to touch the chair legs and baseboards and remember the rooms were mine. At 6, he texted, "Running late. Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at those 2 words until they went fuzzy. Love, as he used it, had become a kind of stamp, inked and applied, not to seal, but to smudge. At 7:30, the map dot settled at Cordell and Hunt. 10 minutes later, a new text from Thomas. "I'm in. Audio by proximity only. You'll get paraphrase if recording is compromised." I paced the kitchen like a patient dog until the first message came. She complimented his risk appetite. He joked about never losing. He touched her wrist. She didn't move it away. Another. He said, "Soon we won't need to be careful." She said, "Promises, promises." He said, "You like when I deliver." The words were cheap, but they worked like tools. Each one pried at a seam I had kept closed for years. I paused by the window and watched the porch light bloom as daylight drained. Then, leaving. Separate exits. Meeting point, garage level 2. I'll stay with them until they split. Minutes crawled. An hour passed. The dot flowed home like ink returning to a well. He slid in beside me on the sofa, kissed my hair, asked about my day with the ease of a man asking about the weather. "The gallery okay?" "Good," I said. "Crowded." People loved the cobalt cityscape. He nodded, eyes on a sports recap he wasn't watching. "That one's nice." He didn't know which painting I meant. He didn't care. And somehow, that detail, that he had stopped seeing the thing I built from nothing, cut cleaner than the rest. The room seemed to shrink to the size of the space between us. He stretched his arm along the back of the couch, fingers almost touching my shoulder. He didn't make contact. Habit without warmth, a gesture that looked like intimacy from a distance and felt like air up close. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, closed the door, and braced my hands on the marble sink. My reflection was composed, except for the eyes. They looked like someone had set a match behind them. I studied the face I knew and the woman who was trying on a new expression. Not fury, not grief. Focus. My phone buzzed again. A video this time. Grainy, angled from shoulder height as if shot by a passerby who cared too little to frame it well. The hotel driveway, the private elevator, a hand on a hip, a look up, a look down. The minimal choreography of people who believe they are genius at not being seen. Below, Thomas's note. "Sunday will be useful. If you need more before then, we can accelerate further. I don't advise confrontation yet." He's curious, not cautious. That's good for you. Good for me. I smiled without humor. Good for me was a phrase I'd always used for vitamins and early nights. Now it tasted like strategy. The following afternoon, I checked our joint calendar, the one where he entered vague blocks like site visit and due diligence. Sunday read, "Out-of-town investor, late return." I stared at the phrase until its edges frayed. Investor could be anyone. Out of town could mean 5 miles away. Late return meant he assumed I would be home, playing the part of lamp and wallpaper. I called the gallery assistant and said I needed Sunday off. "Of course," she replied. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said, and meant it. Things were not okay, but they were becoming clear. Clarity isn't comfort, but it is oxygen. Saturday crawled. I rearranged the framed photos on the hallway shelf. Our wedding at the river's bend. The first night of the gallery in a rented space. A silly snapshot of him grinning behind a giant cardboard key when we closed on the house. I tried to recall the exact moment when the grin moved from his eyes to his mouth and stayed there. I couldn't. Betrayal sometimes shows up in a single photograph. Sometimes it's a long exposure. At noon, I walked the perimeter of the house with a notepad like a caretaker counting windows. I checked the mailbox, catalogs, a bill, a square white envelope with no return address. Inside, a single card printed on thick paper. I missed the blue shirt. No signature, no flourish. Just a sentence dressed as a dare. My skin went cold. I sniffed the card. Vanilla. I pressed my tongue to the word miss as if the paper itself had flavor. It did. Glue and perfume and something like triumph. I laid the card on the counter and photographed it from 3 angles with a quarter beside it for scale. Evidence. The word steadied my hands. I slid the card into a clear sleeve, labeled it with the date, and slipped it into a folder with the receipt, the screenshots, the napkin in a sealed bag. The folder was getting heavier. Good. That evening, I told him I'd be at the gallery early Sunday for an installation that ran late. He nodded, eyes on his phone, thumbs moving like insects. Be careful, he said, the phrase automatic now, like bless you after a sneeze. Always, I said. Sunday morning, the sky was clear in the indifferent way of skies that have witnessed too much and will witness more. He left with a crisp shirt and a practiced kiss. I watched from the window until his car disappeared around the bend, then checked the map. The dot sailed toward the hotel like a ship that knew its harbor by scent alone. Thomas texted, "Suite level. I can get hallway footage, maybe lobby audio if they return. You should not be visible. Not yet." I waited in my car 2 blocks away, engine off, windows cracked. Time stopped being minutes and became a spool of thread I tugged until my fingers burned. I scrolled our old photos and noticed something I had missed for years. In most of them, I was angled toward him. In many, he was angled toward the camera. The realization slid in quietly. He'd been performing for an audience longer than I'd understood. He'd simply upgraded to a duet. At 2:17 p.m., a new text, housekeeping cart near their door. Timing unpredictable. If they call down, I'll know. At 3:02, ordered room service, 2 steak medium, truffle fries, flourless chocolate cake. At 3:40, door cracked, laughter. Her voice, high, practiced, not young, studied, his, lower when he lies. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and breathed until the world became a manageable size again. A couple passed on the sidewalk, arguing about nothing in that affectionate way that assumes nothing will break. I envied their ignorance the way a patient envies an old photograph of himself pre-diagnosis. At 4:08, they called the front desk about extra towels. If they exit, I'll have lobby. If they don't, we'll wait for dusk. Dusk arrived on schedule, smearing gold across the hotel's glass. The dot moved, elevator down, lobby, doors. The woman emerged first, a silk scarf loose at her throat, sunglasses unnecessary under a sky that had become tender. He followed with the bottle green jacket I had bought him the year he closed his first big deal. It suited him perfectly. I had tailored it to his ambition. Thomas's video hit my phone a minute later. The 2 of them in the rotating door, his palm at her back, her glance up like a secret handshake. They separated near the curb because choreography is the first rule of polite deceit. She turned right. He turned left. Another text. I can keep following, or we can stop here for today. Your call. I could have gone home, laid out dinner, and asked about his investor. I could have watched him circle the room like a man adjusting a picture frame until it hung crooked in a way only he could love. Instead, I typed, keep going. The video that arrived 10 minutes later was short and stupid. The hotel garage. He leaned against his car door, looked at his phone, and smiled the smile I'd measured against my own worth for years. He typed something, waited, read the reply, and smiled again, wider. That was the footage that broke me, not because it was explicit, but because it was easy. He had given his best expressions to a screen that wasn't mine. I unlocked the house at dusk to a smell I recognized, his cologne layered over a crisp anxiety. He was already home. "You're early," I said. "Investor canceled," he replied. "Can you believe it?" I could. I set my bag down and watched him cross the kitchen to the wine rack. He pulled a bottle without looking, the way people use muscle memory to disguise intention. "Let's open something nice," he said. "For us." "Sure." The word was glass. I listened to it break as it left my mouth. We ate on the patio under string lights that had once made everything feel like a vacation. He told a story about a contractor who missed a deadline by a week, and I laughed in the right places. He poured the Cabernet we used to save for anniversaries, and I drank with a composure that felt like theft, of my own panic, of my own dignity. Later, he reached for my hand. I let him hold it the way a museum allows a student to touch a plaster copy, never the original. When he slept, I opened the folder again. Evidence fanned across the dining table. Receipt, screenshots, bank statements, photographs, the perfume card. I arranged them like a curator building a room where the theme was motif of repetition. He repeated dinners, lies, routes, gestures. Patterns are faithful servants. They always come when called. Just past midnight, a final text from Thomas. "We have enough to draw a map. If you want more, names, workplace, routines, I can get them by Tuesday. If you want humiliation, that requires choreography. Decide what you want most, a quiet verdict or a public reckoning." I stared at the words until they separated from meaning and became shapes. Quiet, public, verdict, reckoning. He had given me a menu. I looked at the evidence again, the stubborn facts that didn't care about my vows or the story I'd told myself about loyalty. I thought about the first night of the gallery when I promised myself to honor what was true, even when it didn't flatter me. I typed back, fingers steady now. I want what teaches him the difference between secrecy and privacy, between appetite and love. I want a reckoning he will not rewrite. His reply came fast, as if he had been waiting by the door. "Then Sunday isn't the end, it's the rehearsal." And in the quiet that followed, I understood the most important fact I had learned in days. Evidence is not just proof of what happened, it is also permission for what comes next. Evidence gave me clarity, but clarity alone wasn't enough. Proof can rot in a folder, gathering dust, while liars keep living their double lives. I didn't want quiet verdicts. I wanted a reckoning. And to stage a reckoning, you need a plan. It began with a bottle, the black one, sleek and expensive, tucked away in the glove compartment like a secret he thought no one would ever touch. I remembered the weight of it in my hand that night, the way the cap clicked open with a hiss, the slick scent that clung to my fingers like guilt. That bottle was both proof and opportunity. It was his weapon, and it could be mine. But you don't rush a masterpiece. Revenge, like art, requires composition. Light, shadow, texture. Too soon, and it looks sloppy. Too late, and the audience leaves. I needed timing. So I waited. Every day, I smiled across the table. Every night, I folded his shirts, placing each one in drawers he didn't deserve. I was the calm before a storm only I could hear. And in those quiet hours after he fell asleep, I pulled out the folder from its hiding place and studied it like a student cramming for an exam. Receipt, screenshots, photos, audio transcripts, and the card, the one that said I missed the blue shirt. Each piece whispered the same truth. He thought I would never act. He was wrong. On Thursday morning, I made a detour. The hardware store smelled of sawdust and oil, a place of simple men and simple tools. I walked the aisles as if shopping for nails or screws, but my hands reached for something else. Industrial adhesive, clear, permanent, relentless. The label warned, bonds on contact, irreversible without damage, perfect. I bought 2 tubes, one for practice, one for performance. The cashier, a teenager with acne and a half smile, scanned them without question. He had no idea he was selling me justice in a silver tube. Back home, I set a cutting board on the counter. Gloves on my hands, the tube in front of me like a vial of potion. I squeezed a bead onto a strip of paper, watched it ooze, thick and hungry, then harden into a glassy scar. I touched it with the tip of a knife. Solid, permanent, unforgiving, just like betrayal. I cleaned the black bottle meticulously. Every drop of the original liquid down the sink, washed away like excuses. Then, drop by drop, I refilled it with the adhesive. Slow, careful, exact. My hand didn't tremble once. When the last bead slid inside, I shook the bottle gently, screwed the cap back on, and held it up to the light. From the outside, it looked the same. Sleek, innocent, deadly. I wiped the surface with lemon soap, scrubbing away fingerprints, polishing it until it gleamed. Then I placed it back in the glove compartment, aligning it exactly as I'd found it. The car smelled faintly of vanilla and gasoline. I breathed it in one last time and smiled. But one bottle wasn't enough. A trap is only satisfying if there's an audience. Secrets can kill in private, but humiliation thrives in the open. I needed the world to see. That's when I built the second half of the plan. Smoke. In the gallery's storage closet, behind stacks of canvas and solvents, I pulled out an old skillet I used for heat-setting pigments. Heavy, iron, black as regret. I tested it on my kitchen stove. Oil poured, igniter clicked, flame roared. Within seconds, smoke billowed, thick and black, curling toward the ceiling. I coughed, eyes stinging, but forced myself to watch, to memorize, because smoke was a language. It said, emergency. It summoned neighbors. It called firefighters. And my husband's son, my stepson, was a firefighter. The irony cut sharp. The very man Ethan betrayed would be the one to kick down the door. A son forced to see the truth of his father. It was cruel. It was poetic. It was inevitable. I doused the flame, cleaned the skillet, and tucked it away. One more element in a growing arsenal. Saturday evening, I rehearsed. He thought I was at the gallery late, arranging lights for an installation. In reality, I was in the garage, kneeling by his SUV. The concrete was cool beneath my palms, the air sharp with gasoline. I opened the glove compartment. There it was, the black bottle, sitting quiet, waiting. My heart hammered, but my hands stayed steady. I opened it, sniffed. Chemical sharpness masked beneath faint sandalwood. Perfect. I placed it back, adjusted the seat, closed the compartment. Then I pocketed his spare keys, shut the door softly, and stood in the darkness of the garage, listening. The house above me was silent. He was asleep. He didn't know the fuse had already been lit. Sunday morning, I played my part. I've got to drive to Dallas, I told him lightly, buttering toast. New client for the gallery. Might be late. He looked up, surprised, but pleased. Relief flickered in his eyes like a candle shielded from wind. "That's wonderful," he said. "You deserve the contract. I'll hold down the fort." I almost laughed. Hold down the fort? He wasn't guarding anything. He was opening gates. I kissed his cheek, grabbed my purse, and walked out. But instead of Dallas, I crossed the street to Mrs. Peterson's house. She welcomed me in, confusion soft in her eyes. "You're leaving town?" "Not quite," I said. "I just need to borrow your window." She hesitated, then nodded. We sat together, two women with coffee mugs, staring across the street at my home. My stage. At 10:07 a.m., a taxi pulled up. A woman stepped out, floral dress, sunglasses too big for her face. She looked both careful and careless, the kind of confidence that comes from believing the wife will always stay blind. The front door opened. Ethan peeked out, looked both ways like a thief, then ushered her inside. The door closed. I felt Mrs. Peterson's eyes on me. "Claire?" she whispered. "Do you—" "Yes," I said. My voice was steel. "I know." I pulled out my phone, tapped the app connected to the recorder I had hidden in the bedroom. Static. Then laughter, glasses clinking, the sound of a bed creaking. Her voice, high and pleased. "Finally." "We don't have to sneak around." His voice, low and smug. "She thinks she's in Dallas." Mrs. Peterson flinched. I didn't. At 10:23, I tugged the string I had rigged the night before. In my kitchen, the skillet flared, oil ignited, smoke thickened, curling out the window. Within seconds, the neighbors noticed. "Smoke! Fire!" a voice shouted. Someone dialed. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Through my headphones, panic erupted. "What's that smell?" she gasped. "Ethan, something's wrong." "Shut up," he growled. "Don't move." And then, her scream, sharp and frantic. "We can't move." I smiled into my coffee. The fire truck arrived in under 5 minutes, red lights slicing the street. Neighbors crowded lawns, phones raised. Firefighters leapt out, axes and hoses ready. At the front, Daniel. His uniform clung to him, his face pale but resolute. My stepson, my husband's son, the one whose trust would burn today. He shouted orders, voice steady, boots pounding up the porch. Wood splintered as the door crashed open, smoke poured, shouts echoed. Then, silence, broken by one horrified voice. "What the hell is this?" I didn't need to see. I could imagine it perfectly. 2 bodies, tangled, glued, pathetic, begging. My husband, his mistress, my stage. The neighbors gasped, murmured, pointed. "Oh my God, it's them!" someone cried. "The wife's son is right there!" Phones rose higher. Cameras captured every angle. And I, standing behind Mrs. Peterson's curtain, held my mug and whispered, "Curtain up!" Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of their humiliation. Sirens howled as if the city itself were crying out for judgment. Neighbors spilled onto lawns, pajama-clad, robe-wrapped, barefoot, wide-eyed. Phones lit up, raised like candles in a vigil of scandal. Smoke curled from my kitchen window, black and theatrical, the perfect curtain for what was about to be revealed. Daniel, helmet under his arm, shouted orders. His team surged forward, boots slamming against wood, axes biting into my front door. Splinters flew. The house moaned like a guilty witness finally forced to speak. Inside, through the recorder I had planted, chaos reigned. "Allison!" Ethan's voice, ragged, desperate. "Stop screaming!" Her sobbing reply, "I can't move! What the hell did you do?" Then a crash, the sound of sheets tearing, flesh pulling, the unmistakable scrape of panic. I leaned closer to the headphones, pulse steady, each frantic word feeding me oxygen. Daniel's voice thundered through the feed as the firefighters stormed the bedroom. "Get back! Stay calm! What?" His command cracked mid-word. Silence followed, heavy and thick, then a stunned murmur from another firefighter. "Oh my God." The recorder picked up nervous laughter, cut short by Daniel's bark. "Quiet! Out! Everyone out!" But it was too late. Because neighbors were already pressing toward the open doorway, smoke wafting out in black ribbons. Mrs. Miller clutched her pearls, whispering to the woman beside her. Mr. Lewis, 2 doors down, lifted his phone higher, angling for the best shot. Murmurs grew into gasps. "Father-in-law and daughter-in-law? No. No, it can't be. Poor Daniel. I didn't need to see to know." In my mind, the scene was vivid. Ethan and Allison, tangled like animals caught in glue traps, faces pale with shame, eyes darting for escape that wouldn't come. The sheets clung to their skin, pulled tight, revealing too much, hiding too little. A firefighter, younger, unable to contain himself, muttered, This is insane." Another, half laughing, half appalled, "Stuck together, Jesus." Daniel's voice cut sharp, slicing through the noise. "Shut it down. Everyone outside. Now." But order couldn't erase humiliation. The truth had already leaked into the air like smoke, impossible to contain. And still, the neighbors pressed closer. Mrs. Peterson stood beside me at her window, hand trembling on her coffee cup. "Claire," she whispered, "are you hearing this?" "Yes," I said. My voice was ice. Every word. From across the street, the spectacle unfolded. Firefighters carried them out at last, wrapped in emergency sheets, bodies still glued, every step a grotesque parade. Allison's hair was tangled, lipstick smeared, tears cutting black streaks down her cheeks. Ethan's jaw clenched, eyes wild, begging for invisibility in the one moment everyone was watching. Phones recorded from every angle. The whispers turned to exclamations, exclamations to laughter, laughter to disgust. "Unbelievable! Disgusting! Poor Daniel. How could they do this to him?" Daniel walked behind the stretcher, his helmet under his arm, face ashen. Not the face of a firefighter. The face of a son watching both his father and his wife unravel before him. His shoulders hunched, fists tight, but his steps steady. Discipline held him upright when devastation wanted him to collapse. I wanted to run to him, to shield him, to whisper, "It wasn't your fault. It was never your fault." But I stayed behind the curtain. Because tonight wasn't about comfort. It was about revelation. The ambulance doors slammed. Sirens flared again, carrying the disgraced duo into the night. But the echoes stayed behind. Neighbors crowded together, voices overlapping. "Did you see her dress? Did you hear her screaming? They'll never live this down." Mrs. Peterson pulled out her phone, recording, her face stern. "People need to know the truth," she murmured. Her lens lingered on me for half a second, her eyes sharp. She knew. She wouldn't say it aloud, not yet, but she knew this wasn't coincidence. Later that night, at the hospital, I arrived with Daniel. He had driven in silence, hands gripping the wheel as if it were the only thing anchoring him. In the waiting room, fluorescent lights buzzed, the air thick with antiseptic and whispers. Nurses walked by, eyes full of pity they tried to hide. When the doctor emerged, sweat beading on his brow, his words were clipped. "We managed to separate them. No lasting damage. But they'll be sore, physically and otherwise." His attempt at professionalism faltered. Even he couldn't disguise the disgust. We were led to the room, white sheets, harsh lights. Allison curled on one bed, eyes swollen, avoiding my gaze. Ethan sat propped on another, lips parted, ready to explain, to spin. "Claire, he began. I raised a hand, and his voice died. From my purse, I drew out the thick envelope, photos, receipts, screenshots, bank statements, the card. I placed it on the table with a sound that echoed louder than any scream. Then, a second envelope, divorce papers. You sign, I said quietly, and disappear. From me, from Daniel, from everything. His face blanched, jaw working, eyes darting to his son. Daniel's gaze was granite. No rescue there. Allison sobbed, reaching for Daniel's hand. Please, please forgive me. He pulled away as though her touch burned. You're dead to me. His voice cracked, but the words stood. Ethan leaned forward, desperation leaking through. Claire, listen. I cut him off, my voice cold steel. I listened for years, to lies, to excuses, to silence. Now you listen. I pushed the pen across the table. Sign. And with trembling fingers, he did. News spreads faster than fire. By morning, the video of Ethan and Allison being carried out of the house had gone viral in the neighborhood chat groups, then across the city. Clips surfaced on social media. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in scandal. Comments poured like rain. Justice served. This poor woman deserves a crown. Never seen karma this sticky, literally. Everywhere I went, whispers followed. At the bakery near my gallery, a woman touched my arm. You're so strong. I don't know how you endured. At the farmer's market, strangers looked at me with both pity and admiration. My pain had become their entertainment, my vengeance their applause. It should have felt cruel. Instead, it felt necessary. Back at home, the smoke had cleared. The kitchen walls smelled faintly scorched, a reminder of the stage I had set. I stood in the middle of the room, breathing in the silence, no longer heavy, but hollow. Empty, yes, but emptiness can be filled. Upstairs, Daniel moved into the guest room, suitcases lined against the wall. He said little. His grief was quiet, sharp, private. But at dinner, when I set a plate in front of him, he looked up at me for the first time in days. We'll get through this, he said. His voice was cracked porcelain, but it held. And in that moment, I knew the reckoning wasn't just about exposing betrayal. It was about showing us both who we still were, survivors, creators, more than the sum of their deceit, because justice had only begun. The humiliation was public. The divorce was sealed. But the healing, that would be the longest act of all. Divorce is usually signed in silence, in offices with stale coffee, in courtrooms with indifferent clerks. But mine began under fluorescent lights, the stench of antiseptic, and the sound of my husband's mistress sobbing into a hospital pillow. Ethan's signature sprawled across the papers like a wound. When the pen left the page, I exhaled, long and steady. 40 pages, 40 years, bound now by ink and nothing else. He reached for me, eyes pleading, but I stepped back, the distance between us wider than any aisle I had once walked toward him. All those years, Claire, he whispered, voice cracking. Don't erase them. I'm not erasing, I said softly. I'm redefining. His jaw trembled, but the sound of the door closing behind me cut off whatever lie he had left. The scandal didn't fade. If anything, it bloomed. Clips of the stretcher parade multiplied, each with different captions. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the most humiliating way possible. Karma glued together. Wait until you see the firefighter's face. Her husband. Memes appeared within hours. Ethan's once polished face became a punchline. Allison's floral dress, a costume in her tragedy, was mocked in parody videos. Neighbors who once toasted Ethan's business success now whispered, "Traitor," at the sight of his car. Justice wasn't quiet. Justice was loud, viral, merciless. And for the first time, I let it be. Meanwhile, my lawyer worked quickly. With the evidence folder, receipts, photos, recordings, the perfumed card, judges needed little convincing. Infidelity clauses snapped shut like jaws. The bakery chain remained mine, the gallery too. Ethan's assets dwindled, his reputation bled. At the final hearing, I wore black, not for mourning, but for punctuation. He arrived pale, eyes downcast, flanked by a lawyer whose tie was crooked, as if even his representation had lost faith. When the gavel struck, declaring the divorce finalized, I stood tall. He slumped. Outside, reporters waited, cameras flashing like gunfire. "Mrs. Harrison, do you have a statement?" I looked straight into the lens. "Art has always been about truth, sometimes ugly, sometimes beautiful. Today, I choose beauty." And I walked away, heels clicking like applause. Allison didn't appear in court. She hid, ashamed. But shame didn't stop the whispers. Neighbors crossed streets to avoid her. Her name, once a mere footnote in community events, now lived on everyone's tongue. The woman who betrayed her husband with his father-in-law. A grotesque fairy tale no one wanted to tell their children, yet everyone repeated. I didn't need to chase her. The world was doing it for me. At home, silence shifted. No longer suffocating, but cleansing. Daniel still lived in the guest room, grief written in the lines of his face. He didn't speak much of her, didn't need to. Pain doesn't always need words. It breathes in sighs, in the slump of shoulders, in the way he stirred his coffee longer than necessary. One night, as we sat at the kitchen table, he looked at me and said, "Mom, thank you." "For what?" "For not letting him get away with it." His voice cracked, but his eyes held mine, steady, grateful. "For showing me that truth matters, even when it destroys you." I reached across, squeezed his hand. Truth doesn't destroy. Lies do. His grip tightened. In that silence, I felt something new growing between us. Not just mother and son, but allies, survivors, architects of a future neither Ethan nor Allison could corrupt. The bakery thrived. Customers flooded in, curious at first, supportive later. Mrs. Peterson bought extra loaves for the grandchildren, but her eyes told me she was buying solidarity. Strangers left notes on napkins. "Stay strong. You inspire us." One afternoon, a young woman lingered by the counter. She looked down, fumbling with her wallet, before whispering, "My husband cheated. I thought I was alone. Then I saw your story." I handed her a bag with her order, added an extra pastry. "You're not alone," I said, "and you're stronger than you think." Her tears glistened, but her smile bloomed. That moment meant more than any headline. The gallery, too, became reborn. I curated an exhibition titled Resilience. Canvases of fire and ash, rebirth and defiance, shadows turned into color. The opening night was packed. Women lingered at each piece, nodding as if they understood every brushstroke. Men shifted uncomfortably, perhaps wondering what their own secrets might look like in paint. During my speech, I stood beneath the skylight, light pouring down like absolution. "We are not defined by betrayal," I said. "We are defined by what we create afterward." Applause thundered. Cameras clicked. But what I noticed most were the tears in quiet corners. The women holding each other's hands. I wasn't just reclaiming my voice, I was lending it to others. Ethan tried to reach me, of course. Emails unopened, calls unanswered, flowers left on the gallery step, wilting before I returned. One day, a note slipped under my door. Please, one more chance. I didn't even bend to pick it up. I let it lie there, trampled by visitors' shoes, until it was unrecognizable. That was justice too. Yet justice isn't only about punishment. It's about transformation. One Sunday morning, I walked into the gallery early, alone. Sunlight pooled on the wooden floor, the smell of paint fresh from the night before. I stood before a canvas I hadn't shown anyone, a self-portrait, half my face in shadow, half in light. The woman staring back at me wasn't broken. She wasn't betrayed. She was tempered, like glass that had been through fire and come out unshatterable. I signed the corner with a flourish, stepped back, and whispered, I am still here. The world whispered with me. Articles labeled me, the woman who turned betrayal into art. Social media crowned me a symbol of resilience. Invitations arrived, from podcasts, from women's groups, from networks wanting interviews. I declined most. My story was already out there. I didn't need to sell it. But sometimes, late at night, I would scroll through the comments under those viral clips. This is the justice we dream of. Finally, a story where the wife wins. She turned glue into gold. And I smiled, because empowerment isn't just standing tall. It's knowing you've become a mirror. In me, others saw themselves. Ethan faded. He sold his car, moved out of the neighborhood, resigned from the board he once chaired. When his name surfaced, it was always paired with the scandal, a legacy rewritten in shame. Allison disappeared too. Rumor said she left town. Rumor said she begged Daniel for forgiveness. Rumor said she couldn't stand the stares at the grocery store. I didn't chase the truth. Some stories aren't worth archiving. Daniel, though, stayed. He helped at the bakery, managed orders, laughed occasionally. The first real laughs I'd heard in months. Slowly, the weight lifted from his shoulders. One evening, as we closed shop together, he looked at me, a faint smile on his lips. We survived. Yes, I said, and we're stronger. He nodded, flipping the sign to closed. The bell chimed one last time. And in that sound, I heard not an ending, but a beginning. Justice was done. Empowerment was mine. But the story wasn't only about what I lost. It was about what I reclaimed, my voice, my art, my dignity, because betrayal may glue two people together in humiliation. But truth sets the rest of us free. After a storm, silence is never the same. It isn't heavy or suffocating anymore. It's alive, humming with possibility, like the first quiet after a concert where your ears still ring with echoes of the music. That's what my home became. The clock in the dining room ticked the same way it always had, but it no longer accused me. It counted forward. The air in the kitchen no longer carried the scent of betrayal. It smelled of coffee, cinnamon, and the steady rhythm of life being rebuilt. Daniel moved out of the guest room, not back into the house he had shared with her, but into his own apartment near the fire station. I need space, he told me gently, but I'll always be close. And he was. He stopped by most mornings before his shift, sometimes in uniform, sometimes still rumpled from sleep. We drank coffee together on the porch, neighbors passing by with small smiles, silent acknowledgments that we had both survived. The bakery thrived beyond my imagination. Orders doubled, then tripled. Customers didn't just come for bread. They came for the story, for the woman who had stood up against betrayal and walked away stronger. Local journalists covered it, calling me the baker who baked her own justice. I laughed at the headline, but a part of me savored the sweetness of it. One afternoon, a little girl came in with her mother, clutching $1 in her hand. She whispered shyly, "I want to buy the bread from the brave lady." I bent down, handed her a warm roll, and whispered back, "Bravery tastes better when you share it." That night, alone in my kitchen, I cried. Not the sharp tears of pain, but the soft ones of gratitude. The gallery, too, became my sanctuary. My exhibition Resilience gained attention far beyond Austin. Visitors stood in front of canvases with tears on their cheeks, telling me their own stories of betrayal, loss, survival. They didn't need to know mine. The art spoke for itself. One painting in particular, the Phoenix window, drew crowds. Bright reds, molten golds, streaks of black rising into light. A rebirth. Women stood before it with their arms crossed, then relaxed their shoulders, exhaling as though they, too, were rising. During closing night, I stood under the skylight, remembering the day I had almost let lies define me. Instead, I had painted myself free. Ethan vanished from the city. His name lingered only in whispers, attached forever to scandal. Allison disappeared too, swallowed by gossip and shame. I didn't chase their endings. Justice had already been written. Their punishment wasn't just separation or humiliation, it was obscurity. And me? I chose something different. Not to vanish, but to expand. I joined a women's group at the community center. We gathered on Thursday evenings, a circle of voices, some cracked, some fierce. I told my story once, briefly, and then listened. Betrayal has many shapes, but healing has one: solidarity. I began teaching baking classes on weekends. Flour dusted across the countertops, laughter rising with the dough. Women kneaded, rolled, shaped loaves, and with every movement, they whispered their own resilience. The bakery was no longer just mine, it was ours. Daniel and I grew closer in ways we never expected. One night, he came over after a long shift, face drawn, but eyes steady. "I can't stop seeing it," he confessed, voice hoarse. "Them. In that room." I set down 2 mugs of cocoa, slid one toward him. "Some images don't fade," I said softly, "but they stop hurting once you decide they don't define you." He looked at me, tears shining. "You really believe that?" I nodded. "Look at me. I'm still here." And slowly, he smiled. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something new, something truer. I traveled, visited art shows, tried recipes I'd once ignored. I bought myself flowers every week, white peonies, the very blooms he once gave to another. Only now, their petals opened for me, and me alone. One Sunday morning, I walked through the market square, sunlight spilling across cobblestones. A woman brushed past me and whispered, "You're the glue story, aren't you?" I stopped, startled. She smiled warmly. "Don't be embarrassed. You're a legend." I laughed, really laughed, the sound echoing across the stalls. A legend. Who would have thought betrayal could make me that? And now, as I sit in my gallery office, pen in hand, light slanting through the window, I realize the story isn't about Ethan or Allison. It never was. It's about me, about choosing to stop being silent, about building from ashes, about turning glue into gold. Because betrayal can break you, or it can rebuild you. The choice is yours. If my story reached you, I want to know. Tell me in the comments. Where in the world are you listening from? Has betrayal ever touched your life? And what did you do to rise from it? Your words matter. Your story matters. And if you want more tales of resilience, justice, and women reclaiming their power. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss the next story. Because together, we're not just surviving, we're rising.